Priest Alex Moore-Minott is a Windward Maroon, the leader of the West Indian Tribal Society, the first indigenous organization in the Caribbean to be accredited by the World Intellectual Property Organization, a UN body on intellectual property, and an initiated priest of Niaah, Jamaica's first and oldest religion, and Jamaica's indigenous traditional religion. He's a UWI graduate with an honors degree in international relations, a former Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Accompong Maroons, an indigenous tribal community in Western Jamaica, and he's also the Vice President of the Blue Lagoon Alliance of the Seas, a cooperative of fisherfolk, traditional rafters, and boaters. I've been privileged enough to hear Alex speak, and I am quite impressed, quite excited about his presentation today. So let me ask Alex to give us his own insights in terms of chattel slavery and the legacies or implications for cultural reparation.
Sun love, everyone. Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, great. So once again, thank you very much to the CRR for this lovely opportunity. I must say that I was very heartened to see the invitation. And, you know, Dr. Stanley Niaah has said so many good things about me. I must say thank you. Sometimes when you're a bit younger, I think that you fear that there isn't enough recognition for the work that you do. And because I approach this matter from a very culture-based and grassroots-based standpoint, I sometimes fear that there will be no academic recognition. But I've been given this opportunity, and I must say thank you very much to the center, to Dr. Stanley Niaah, and to the entire team for inviting me to this. So if you look here, you will see this presentation. It's just a few slides. Isn't anything too major, but what I hope to do is carry our audience through a simple sequence so that people can understand why this matters to me personally and why it would matter to the indigenous people of this land. And when I say indigenous, I must make it very clear. There is a narrative that is perpetrated by the colonizer and by those who sympathize with the colonizer's version of history. And I must put an asterisk beside this because the colonizer has written very factual records as well as put out a fabricated history to confuse us. It was not believed that the people who look like us, dark-skinned indigenous people, would ever have the ability to read some of the more in-depth documents, the real factual documents that the British and other colonizers wrote. But luckily for us, as Dr. Stanley Niaah mentioned, institutions like the University of the West Indies have allowed us as a people and allowed me personally to be able to read at a higher level of comprehension and to do the research work that I've been doing, my team and I have been doing for the past maybe 10 years. So next slide, please. So here, simple question. Why is the repeal of the Obeah Act so important to me personally? Next slide, please. So it's a bit squished, but this is a record from the Caribbean Religious Trials website. Okay. Why does her name elude me right now? It will come back, and maybe Dr. Stanley Niaah can help me. The lovely sister who did this,
Beverly
this
Carey?
project. No, it wasn't Beverly Carey. It was actually a foreigner. Her name is evading me right now, but it may come back. But this is a
Diana
database.
Payton. Diana
Diana
Payton.
Payton, thank you very much.
obiahistories.org.
Diana.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much. So Diana Payton, she created this database of all of the Caribbean religious trials, or we say trials under the various Obia Acts of various islands throughout the Anglophone or English-speaking Caribbean, as they love to call us. So, as I always do, I try to see what my family involvement has been in any of this. And this is the result that I received from putting my name, my family surname into this database search engine. And the trials themselves and the trial details are actually quite appalling. If you really look at how our people were classified by these colonizers, if you really look at how our people were, as they say in modern parlance, classed, right, and represented by these colonizers, all of the material representations of our spiritual culture, how it was spoken about as trash, as junk. But the very interesting thing about it is that this was serious enough for them to have entire court trials, to, in many cases, exile people from the island for practicing our spirituality, in many cases, execution by hanging, in many cases, arbitrary arrest for indefinite time periods. This is what I realized, that my family, my own bloodline, my ancestors had suffered under this act. I'd wondered for a very long time why I had chosen this path. And I don't know if Diana Payton will see this at any point in time, but I must say to her, thank you for doing this project when so many other people, our own people, didn't see the necessity for this project, right? Or a project such as this. Next slide, please. Quite unfortunately, yet again, there is another researcher, a foreigner, who has delved into the depths of our culture, right? And this is Kenneth Mansfield Bilby. And the detail that he took, the depth that he dove into our culture, our traditional spirituality really woke me up personally. And I said, as a practitioner, as someone who has been educated to the tertiary level, I now feel that I have a duty, and not just because my bloodline is represented in any of these articles, but the mere fact that foreigners decided that they would take upon themselves the depth of the research of our knowledge, our traditional ways of knowing, our traditional ways of representing ourselves. This really sparked something within me. But I thank him, and he and I have had many heated discussions, because a particular pet project of mine in 2018 was to secure the repatriation of cultural material, videos, audio, pictures, etc., from the Smithsonian Institution. And what I got, and this was for the Rio Grande Valley Maroon community, and what I got, I was happy about, but at the same time, they were barefaced enough to say, we have so many more articles, so many more recordings of your culture, of your heritage, etc. But you're going to have to fight us for it, right? And this they were making absolutely plain and clear. But I still thank Kenneth Bilby for placing things like this on record, because these records of bloodlines only truly exist within an oral space, within the singing of the bongo people who play the kumina drum. And we knew throughout oral history, throughout our family, that our people come from a long line of healers, priests, you know, all of these various things, dancers, oral historians. And so it was incumbent upon me as an individual to pursue this research work. So I just thought it was important to say why I personally had to involve myself in this struggle. Next slide, please. Technical difficulties. Okay, thank you very much. This is an excerpt from one volume, I think it was volume 3 of Edward Lang's so-called History of Jamaica from 1774. And you know, as a young man who was initiated into a traditional Maya society, actually more than one, right? When I happened upon this particular piece, it angered me, but it reminded me of our position that we are now at the lowest level and we have now only the space to go up. I would read this for you guys. Not long since, some of these execrable wretches in Jamaica introduced what they called the Mayal dance and established a kind of society into which they invited all they could. The lure hung out was that every Negro initiated into the Mayal society would be invulnerable to the white men. And although they might in appearance be slain, the Obeah man could, at his pleasure, restore the body to life. Now, this glosses over an entire cultural dimension or entire cultural dimensions of why our people would be initiated into such societies. Our people were not Christian. This was our people's institution, our people's spiritual institution, these societies. And the pale-skinned invader told himself that if, as long as it was not his religion, his tradition, it was to be ignored. And if you notice what our people were called, execrable wretches. Next slide, please. But I spoke earlier of a duality in terms of what was presented as history and what was presented as to themselves, the colonizers themselves, as fact. And if we look at the so-called historical references, if we look at the so-called historical accounts, we recognize that the language written in those accounts that was created for the popular mass to turn people against us and our traditions differed greatly from what was placed in military records and in political records, because of course, the Roman Empire has never lied to itself. Next slide, please. This is a record of a record, we say maybe a certificate of a record held at Lambeth Palace in England. Now, for those who don't know, Lambeth Palace is the seat of the Holy See of the British version of Christianity called Anglicanism or the Anglican Church. The Archbishop of Canterbury, this is his headquarters. And this is from Louis de Beaumont to Bishop Gibson, May 28, 1740, with a copy of so-and-so. He has, and that is Louis de Beaumont. He has baptized 113 persons, of whom 93 are Negroes. No effort is made to convert the treaty Negroes, who are allowed a high priest of their own cult. Now, if we look past the modern idea of what a cult is, and look into the fact that even Christianity was once branded as a cult, we recognize now that in the highest levels of the British Church, the Anglican Church, we were recognized, our spiritual or religious traditions, our priesthood was recognized, and it was recognized by them that there was a high priest. And of course, the Obeah Act and all of these so-called laws created by the colonizer were just created to erode these institutions, to break us down, to break down our spiritual unity. Next slide, please. Now, within the West Indian Tribal Society, which is the indigenous religious organization and society that I happen to be the leader of, and I'm so honored to be the leader of, research is a very important pillar of our operations. And I'm going to give just a snippet of a piece of research that we are currently doing, because much accolades are heaped upon Ancestor Taki for being the reason that the Obeah Act was created in 1760. However, we have found in our research that there were indeed Obeah Acts decades before that, maybe as much as 50 years before that. Next slide, please. So it is a bit blurry, right? But it says here on Friday, so this, before I go any further, this snippet is from 1741. So this person was tried at Morant Bay before James Donaldson and Joseph Orr Esquires and a jury of 3 freeholders. So this is just some guys, some colonizers that claim to own our land. On the Obeah Act, on a charge for laying obeah and procuring a phial of strong poison to destroy the white people on Stanton Estate. This is in St. Thomas. So this is from 1741, and we in our society are working very hard to track down those earlier Obeah Acts, and we hope to publish a paper soon concerning it once we have completed our research. So we hope to share that with the community when we are able to find everything. So finally, I will wrap up with suggestions. Next slide. So my suggestions concerning the internal religious and spiritual reparations that I feel should come from the government of Jamaica and other institutions. 1, internal reparations through the abolition of the Obeah Act. 2, legal recognition of indigenous religious institutions. 3, a declaration by the government of Jamaica on Mile Day, which with a special focus on the 3 national heroes that were Mialists. 4, repatriation of artifacts and ancestral remains by Jamaican institutions such as the Institute of Jamaica, Jamaica National Heritage Trust, and the UWI Department of Archaeology. And finally, 5, funding for indigenous religious institutions to undergo reparation activities. Thank you. Peace and love.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I'm really so pleased that the 2 presenters so far have, in a sense, set a tradition of just locating themselves in this work. The kind of trials and tribulation, particularly through Alex's presentation, that would have been revealed in relation to spiritual practice. So much so that there's a legislative infrastructure to suppress, obliterate, in fact, eradicate these kinds of spiritual practices, Obeah, Mayal as a system, for example. And more importantly, Alex's presentation positions for us the importance of records, the importance of oral records, oral history, and most importantly, the importance of research. That throughout his presentation, we heard that at a personal level, Alex is invested in doing the research to unearth some of the kinds of, let's call them lies, let's call them misinformation, the propaganda, the kind of information placed in front of us about ourselves that reflect less than truths. So I want to just underscore those points as we transition